If I told you that my mom once smiled sweetly at my girlfriend while secretly handing her a typed letter calling me unhinged and a danger to women, would you believe me? Or would you think I'm exaggerating, bitter, or maybe just one of those dramatic Reddit guys looking for sympathy clicks? Honestly, I wish I was making it up. My name's Scott. I'm 33, and I've spent the better part of my life trying to navigate a relationship with a mother who smiles like a saint in public and slices like a scalpel behind closed doors. People love her. That's the worst part. She's charming in a way only truly dangerous people know how to be. She bakes cookies for the neighbors, remembers birthdays, donates to charities, and always plays the victim when things go sideways. I used to think I was the problem, that maybe I was just too sensitive, or that I didn't appreciate all the sacrifices she made for me. But the older I got, the more I realized she wasn't sacrificing. She was investing in an image. And anyone who dared to scratch beneath the surface got buried in sweet-smelling lies and passive-aggressive guilt. It didn't start with my ex. That was just the final straw. If I had to pinpoint when it all began, I'd probably go back to middle school. I was 13, struggling with pretty bad anxiety, which back then nobody really talked about. I'd get panic attacks before tests, or even just going to gym class. I wasn't athletic, and I definitely wasn't cool, so I got picked on a lot. But I was smart. Too smart, she used to say. Scott, no one likes a know-it-all. Scott, you're going to make people uncomfortable if you correct them like that. Scott, stop fidgeting, you're embarrassing me. That was the word she loved, embarrassing. It came up in every fight, every scolding, every moment I tried to just be myself. I'd make a joke she didn't find funny, embarrassing. I'd get emotional watching a sad movie, embarrassing. I'd try to explain something I learned in science class, and she'd cut me off with that tight-lipped smile. Scott, no one cares about that. You're making people uncomfortable. The thing is, she never yelled. Not once. My dad did sometimes. He wasn't a bad guy, just frustrated and tired and quietly fading into the background. But Mom? She weaponized calm. She'd lower her voice when she was angry, not raise it. She'd smile wider when she was furious. And every correction came gift-wrapped in sweet, concerned language. I'm only telling you this because I care. You'll thank me one day, sweetie. I just want you to have friends. I didn't realize how much that shaped me until I moved out for college. I chose a school on the other side of the country, Boston to LA, just to breathe. And for the first time in my life, I made real friends. Friends who liked the same weird sci-fi books I did, who didn't flinch when I got too excited about quantum mechanics or ancient mythology. I felt like I was finally becoming someone outside her shadow. And for a while, she seemed okay with it. Weekly calls, the occasional care package, even a proud of you text once when I got into the honors program. But that was the calm before the storm. When I started dating Claire, my first serious girlfriend, everything changed. At first, Mom pretended to like her, sent her a welcome gift, complimented her photos on Facebook, even invited her to Thanksgiving. But little things started slipping through. Backhanded compliments. Questions about Claire's family that felt more like subtle interrogations. She's very pretty, Scott, but does she challenge you intellectually? Her parents seem casual. Do they value education the way we do? You're so sensitive, sweetie. I hope she understands that. Claire laughed it off. I did too. I didn't want to believe she was doing it again. Not this time. Then, about 9 months into our relationship, Claire started pulling away. She stopped calling as much. Got quiet when I asked her what was wrong. And one night, after I flew home to surprise her for her birthday, she broke up with me. No big fight. Just a quiet conversation on her front porch while I stood there holding a box of her favorite pastries. She said, "You're unstable." Claire whispered, not even meeting my eyes. She told me you had violent outbursts, that you were manipulative, that I needed to be careful. My stomach dropped. My mom told you that. Claire just nodded. I didn't want to believe her. I really didn't. But she seemed so sincere. And then I started noticing little things. The way you get quiet sometimes. The way you don't talk about your feelings. I don't know. Maybe she's right. Maybe you're not ready. I didn't even fight it. What was the point? I walked home that night in the rain, suitcase dragging behind me. And for the first time in my adult life, I realized something that should have hit me years earlier. My mom didn't want me to be happy. Not really. Not if it meant I'd stop needing her. Not if it meant someone else saw a version of me that she couldn't control. That night broke something in me. But it also lit a fuse. I didn't scream. I didn't call her to confront her. I didn't even tell her I knew what she'd done. I played along, smiled on our weekly video calls, sent her flowers for Mother's Day, replied to her messages like everything was fine, because I was done playing defense. If she wanted to shape narratives, fine. I could do that too. So when her 60th birthday started creeping up and she asked me, sweet as ever, if I'd handle the guest list for her big celebration, I said yes. I smiled. I took notes. I promised to make it unforgettable. And I meant it. But before I get to the party, you need to understand just how deep this rabbit hole goes. Because what she did to Claire, that wasn't her first time. Not even close. And once I started digging, once I started reaching out to people from her past, the stories I uncovered made me realize that maybe, just maybe, I'd been the least of her victims. You ready for that? Because that's when things start getting messy. I kept my cool for almost a year after Claire walked away. Most people thought I took the breakup surprisingly well, and in a way, I did. I didn't spiral. I didn't drink myself into oblivion or make some grand, dramatic post on social media. But I didn't move on either. Because I couldn't. Not when the reason she left had nothing to do with who I really was, and everything to do with the picture someone else painted of me. I didn't stop thinking about that porch conversation. The way Claire's voice trembled. Not with fear, just uncertainty. Like she didn't know which version of me to trust. The one who had stayed up all night with her during her finals week, making flashcards and cooking pasta, or the one her mom whispered about over coffee with mine. The unstable one. The dangerous one. The fiction. But a well-told fiction is often more powerful than truth, especially when it comes from someone with perfect posture and a church mom voice. My mom's not loud. She never has been. But she doesn't need to be. Her weapon of choice has always been subtlety, picking at reputations like threads, unraveling people one half-concerned comment at a time. And the worst part? She does it with the full confidence that she's helping, fixing, correcting, making people better. She sees herself as some twisted Florence Nightingale with a step-forward smile. After Claire, I started paying closer attention to everything. Her tone, her word choices, the way she talked about other people. I started noticing patterns I'd ignored for decades, like how she always emphasized the parts of my life that were failures, but framed them as gentle concern. Oh, Scott struggled in school growing up, but he's doing his best. Scott's always been a little anxious, but he's very smart. He's such a sensitive soul. Sometimes that makes life harder for him. Those weren't just innocent comments. They were character summaries. And she'd been narrating my life to others like that since I was a teenager. That became clear when I ran into one of my old high school friends, James, at a conference in Chicago. We grabbed dinner, reminisced for a bit, and somewhere between appetizers and the main course, he said something that knocked the wind out of me. You know, James said, swirling his drink, your mom once told my parents you were seeing a therapist because you had rage problems. That you punched a wall or something. I blinked. What? Yeah. I remember because my mom got all weird about me hanging out with you for a few months after that. Thought you had some kind of anger issue. But you were always just kind of chill. I laughed, but it sounded hollow. I've never punched anything in my life. Except maybe a pillow. James shrugged. Guess it was just one of those weird rumors. No idea where it came from. I knew exactly where it came from. That conversation haunted me on the flight back home. And it was the final push I needed to do something I'd never dared before. I started contacting my mom's past. Not mine. Hers. I began with her exes. Quietly. Carefully. I used my middle name, changed my email signature, even created a fake Facebook account under the alias Ben Riley, just to avoid tipping her off. I wasn't trying to catfish anyone. I just didn't want them to hear Scott and immediately shut down. It was easier than I expected. Turns out, she'd burned more bridges than I thought. I reached out to one of her old college boyfriends, Thomas, who now ran a nonprofit in Portland. He responded within hours. Diane, he wrote. Wow, haven't heard that name in a while. I'm guessing this is about the way she sabotaged your career. I stared at the message for a full minute before replying. No, but I'm listening. He told me how, back in 1984, they were both applying for a research fellowship in New York. They'd been dating for almost 2 years, and she had promised she wasn't interested in the same program. We made a deal, he wrote. She said she wanted to stay local, so I submitted my application. A week later, I found out she had applied behind my back. Not only that, she plagiarized parts of my proposal and submitted it as her own. She got the fellowship. He didn't. And when I confronted her, he wrote, she told me I was being paranoid, that I was emotionally unstable and threatened by her success. Sound familiar? It did. Uncomfortably so. That was the first domino. Over the next 2 months, I reached out to more people, old co-workers, former friends, even a woman named Beth who used to be my mom's best friend back in the 90s. She now lived in Florida and ran a crafting YouTube channel. We FaceTimed once, and she didn't hold back. Diane destroyed my marriage, she said bluntly, fiddling with a pair of scissors mid-call. I trusted her, told her things I didn't even tell my therapist. And one day, my husband starts acting weird. Cold. Distant. I found out she'd been calling him, saying I was having an affair, saying I was mentally unstable. All lies. Every single one. And you know what the worst part is? She convinced our entire friend group that she was just looking out for him, that she was concerned, like some kind of guardian angel. But she just wanted to break us up. And she did. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a pattern, a web, and I was starting to see just how big it was. Meanwhile, on the surface, Mom was busy planning her big 6-0. She'd decided she wanted a garden party. Elegant but casual, she said. Just family and close friends. Maybe 30 people at most. Of course, she handed me the guest list to manage. Gave me free rein, as long as I stuck to her vision. I nodded, smiled, took notes. But in the back of my mind, the fuse kept burning. And then came the breaking point. It was a Tuesday evening. Nothing special. I had stopped by my parents' house to drop off some stuff for the party. Catalogs, vendor lists, sample menus. Dad was out. Just me and Mom. She made tea. We sat in the sunroom, light streaming through the windows like something out of a Hallmark movie. She was in her element. Polished, poised, perfectly pleasant. Until she pulled out a manila folder and said, "By the way, I've been meaning to talk to you about something." I was instantly on alert. "What is it?" She slid the folder across the table. "It's a printout of your social media posts. Some of the things you've been sharing lately, they concern me." I opened it. Inside were screenshots of tweets, Facebook shares, even an Instagram story I posted months ago about mental health advocacy. Nothing inappropriate. Nothing alarming. Just vulnerable stuff. "Mom," I said slowly, "why do you have this?" She folded her hands neatly. "Because I worry. I really do. And I think you're broadcasting some things that could damage your reputation. Especially if you ever want to get married. Or find a new job. Employers look at this stuff, Scott. So do women." I stared at her. "You went through my accounts?" She tilted her head. "They're public. And it's not just me who noticed. A few people from church mentioned your posts. Said they were worried." "Worried about what?" "That I care about mental health. That I speak up about anxiety and trauma." "Sweetheart," she said, with that nauseating calm, "people don't like messy. They like strength. Confidence. Not this." And there it was. Not this. Not me. Not the me who finally found the courage to talk about the things she spent decades suppressing. Not the me who was slowly reclaiming a voice she'd spent years reshaping into a shadow of herself. I stood up. My hands were shaking, but I wasn't afraid. "Not anymore. You did this to Claire, didn't you?" Her eyes flicked up. "What are you talking about?" "You told her I was dangerous. Unstable. You're the reason she left." She didn't deny it. Just looked at me with that infuriating calm. I only told her what she deserved to know. And just like that, the fuse reached the dynamite. I walked out of that sunroom without another word. Got into my car, drove home, and sat in the dark for a long time, just letting it all settle. The years, the manipulation, the lies, the control. And then I opened my laptop, pulled up the party spreadsheet, and started making some edits. I didn't delete her guest list. I expanded it. Because if Diane wanted a celebration, I was going to give her one she'd never forget. But not just yet. First, I had some more phone calls to make. And some very interesting invitations to send. Rock bottom doesn't always look like it does in the movies. There's no dramatic montage, no broken mirrors scene, no rain-soaked breakdown on a park bench. Sometimes, it's just the quiet moments when you look around and realize you're completely alone, and the people who are supposed to love you most might never have loved you for who you really are. After that final conversation in the sunroom, something inside me fractured. I wasn't angry, not in the screaming, punching walls kind of way. It was quieter than that. Like a light had gone out. I stopped answering her calls. Stopped replying to her texts. I needed space, and I didn't trust myself to keep pretending. Not anymore. For the first time in my life, I began to grieve, not just for Claire or for the years I'd spent under my mom's thumb, but for the boy I used to be. The kid who thought if he just behaved the right way, achieved enough, stayed small enough, he might finally earn her full approval. That boy was gone. And the truth was, he'd never stood a chance. I'd like to say things got better right away, but they didn't. Not at first. The first few weeks were hard. I barely slept. Ate too much one day, not at all the next. Work felt meaningless. I was doing freelance UI design at the time, mostly startup projects and client websites, and I started falling behind. One particularly bad week, I missed a deadline and lost a decent client. Another ghosted me entirely after I pushed back on some unreasonable changes. I didn't tell anyone what I was going through. My dad had always been a passive observer in the chaos, quiet and neutral, like Switzerland. He loved me, I think, in his own silent way, but he never intervened. And after years of enabling her, I wasn't ready to confide in him. My friend group was scattered, mostly old college connections who were now married, busy, or distant. I tried calling James once, the high school friend I'd seen in Chicago, but I hung up before he answered. I didn't know how to explain any of it without sounding crazy. My mom has been psychologically dismantling me since I was a teenager. Isn't exactly easy to slip into casual conversation. But in that darkness, something unexpected happened. I started writing again. It had been years since I'd touched a blank page for myself. Not client work, not marketing copy, just me, my thoughts, my voice. It started with a few scattered journal entries, then became longer reflections. I poured everything out, memories, doubts, moments I'd buried deep because they were too confusing to process at the time. I wrote about how Mom used to tell me I was too dramatic when I cried after school, even though I'd been shoved into a locker. How she'd made me apologize to a teacher who mocked me in front of the class. How she once told me, at 17, that if I didn't fix my attitude, no woman would ever love me. Writing gave me distance. It let me hold the truth in my hands instead of just in my chest. Eventually, I started posting some of it anonymously on a blog, just essays about growing up under emotional manipulation, about reclaiming identity, about healing. I didn't expect anyone to read them. I just needed a place to put the pain. But then one post went semi-viral. It was called The Smile That Cuts, Surviving a Parent Who Weaponizes Niceness. Within a few days, it had over 10,000 views. I started getting emails, first from strangers, then from therapists, advocates, even a few teachers. People telling me they saw their own parents in my words. One woman wrote, "I thought I was the only one. Reading this made me feel less crazy." Another said, "This helped me finally explain to my husband why I'm so afraid of my mother's compliments." I was stunned, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel alone. That little blog snowballed. Over the next few months, I built a modest following. Nothing massive, just a community of readers who found comfort in shared experience. I added a newsletter, started posting weekly. My inbox filled with stories, raw, heartbreaking, powerful stories from people all over the world who had survived the quiet kind of abuse. The kind no one sees coming because it comes wrapped in good intentions. And here's the twist no one expected, not even me. One of those readers was an editor at a mid-sized publishing house. She reached out with a simple message. "I think you're telling an important story. Have you ever considered writing a book?" At first, I laughed. A book? Me? But then I thought, why not? So I said yes. For the next 6 months, I wrote like my life depended on it. Some days it felt like therapy, other days like surgery. I had to peel back layers I didn't even know I had. But I stayed with it. I structured the book around stories from my past, some painful, some quietly triumphant. I included excerpts from reader emails, with permission, research on emotional manipulation, and reflections on healing. I titled it, Not the Crazy One, because for so long, that's exactly what I'd been made to feel. Meanwhile, my mom still thought I was planning her birthday. I played it cool, sent her periodic updates, asked fake questions about color schemes, music preferences, catering. She was thrilled. "This is going to be so special, Scott," she told me on the phone one night, her voice syrupy sweet. "Thank you for making it all about family." I smiled through my teeth and told her it was my pleasure. But in the background, I was building something very different. I had a second guest list now, one she didn't know about. A spreadsheet labeled Private RSVPs. It included every person I'd contacted during my research. Every ex-boyfriend, every ex-friend, former coworkers, estranged relatives, even a few people from our old church who had quietly distanced themselves over the years. Most of them said yes immediately. She always pretended to care about me, then talked behind my back. She told my fiancé I was an alcoholic. I've been sober since college. She accused me of stealing jewelry just because I wore it better than her. The stories just kept coming. Some of them asked if it was safe, if there would be any backlash. I'm not trying to start a fight, one woman wrote, but I want her to know what she did. I promised them all the same thing, no shouting matches, no drama, just a chance to speak, to be seen, to hold a mirror up to the woman who had spent her entire life polishing hers. And maybe, just maybe, shake the perfect image she clung to so tightly. But I wasn't doing this for revenge anymore. Not exactly. That had changed. What I wanted now was truth. I wanted to see her face when the people she stepped on finally stepped forward. I wanted to show her that the narratives she'd crafted weren't airtight, that the world she controlled with a smile and a whisper was starting to crack. And most of all, I wanted to reclaim my story, not as the unstable son, not as the embarrassment, not as the quiet kid who never fought back, but as the man who finally did. Of course, I knew there would be fallout. Maybe some family would side with her. Maybe she'd cry, spin it, double down. But for once, I didn't care. I wasn't afraid of her anymore. And that, more than any party, any book deal, any applause, that was the real victory. The rise wasn't loud. It was a quiet, steady reclaiming of self. And with every chapter one wrote, every invitation I sent, every email I received from someone who had survived a Diane of their own, I grew stronger. She had torn me down for years. Now, I was building something better. Not just for me, but for everyone she tried to silence. And her 60th birthday? That was going to be the stage. Not for revenge, for truth. But I still had one final surprise in store. One name on the list she never expected. One person whose story would hit harder than all the others combined. And when she saw them standing in that garden, drink in hand, looking her dead in the eye, that was going to be the moment everything changed. By the time May rolled around, barely a month out from my mom's 60th birthday, I had everything I needed. The stories, the names, the receipts. My email threads were stacked, my spreadsheet was color-coded, and my nerves were wired tight. Every single night, I lay awake rehearsing different outcomes. Would she cry? Would she explode? Would she go quiet, play the victim, and start spinning a counter-story on the spot like she always did? Didn't matter. Because for once, I was ahead of her, and I wasn't going to blink. But if I was going to pull this off right, I needed precision. This wasn't just about inviting people she wronged. It had to be curated, structured, strategic. If I went in guns blazing, it would look like an ambush, and then she'd have the perfect excuse to discredit everything. She'd twist it into, Scott's always had a flair for drama. I think he needs help, honestly. And everyone who didn't know better would believe her. No, I needed to let the truth speak for itself. I had to stage it like a mirror she couldn't look away from. So I split the event into two lists. List A was her official party, the one she knew about. A carefully pruned group of 30 close friends, church ladies, wine club pals, and a few distant cousins she still talked to. We booked a beautiful garden venue about 20 minutes from town, the kind of place with string lights, a gazebo, and overpriced finger food. She loved it. List B, though, that was mine. I booked a second venue, less polished, more intimate, just across the street. A private room in a historic community center with sliding glass doors, a sound system, and, crucially, a full wall of windows that faced the garden venue's west lawn. It was perfect. The idea wasn't to disrupt her party. That would be too easy, too obvious. I wanted her to enjoy herself, float around in that self-made spotlight, toast her curated image. And then, when the time was right, I'd give her the second act. But I needed a hook. That's when I thought of the photo wall. Mom had always loved memory boards, those cork things with Polaroids from vacations, school plays, weddings. She'd kept one in the hallway for years, always changing the photos depending on who came over. One month, it was my childhood school pictures. The next, it was her charity work with the garden club. So I decided to build my own. I emailed everyone on List B and asked them for one thing. A photo of themselves from the year they were closest to my mother. A moment in time, frozen, when they trusted her, loved her, before everything unraveled. I paired each photo with a short quote from our conversations, just 1 or 2 lines. Nothing dramatic, just the truth. She told me I was too emotional to be a good wife. She said I reminded her of someone she couldn't trust. She smiled and said I'd never be enough for Scott. She told me I should be grateful she still invited me. Each quote went under a photo. Black frame, white background. Simple, clean. The effect was devastating. When I finished hanging them in the community center, I stood back and stared at the wall of quiet grief and subtle strength. These weren't accusations. They were revelations. Proof of a pattern. A life's worth of manipulation, one frozen smile at a time. And still, there was one more thing I hadn't done. I hadn't talked to Claire. I don't know why I waited so long. Maybe part of me was scared she wouldn't want to be involved, or that seeing her again would tear open something I'd finally begun to heal. But I couldn't shake the thought. She deserved to know the truth too. So I wrote her an email. Not a plea, not an apology, just honesty. Hey Claire, I know it's been a long time, and I'm not writing to reopen anything. I just wanted to tell you that I finally understand what happened. It wasn't you, and it wasn't me either. I've spent the last year learning the truth about my mom, really learning it. And I've talked to a lot of people who were hurt by her in ways that look eerily familiar. I don't expect a response. But if you ever want to talk, or if you want to hear what I've learned, I'll be at the community center across from her birthday venue on June 10th, 6 p.m. No pressure, just truth. I stared at the screen for a long time before hitting send. And once I did, I didn't check my email for 2 days. When I finally opened it again, there it was. A single line reply. I'll be there. I don't know how long I sat there, just staring at that sentence. But it was the first time in months I cried without shame. It felt like closure waiting on the horizon. And then, almost as if fate wasn't done yet, came the last piece of the puzzle. I got a call from my cousin Daniel. He was one of the few relatives who distanced himself from the family years ago, but I never knew why. We'd been close as kids, until one summer he just stopped showing up to reunions. I asked Mom once, and she said something vague about substance problems and bad decisions. But now he was calling me. I heard about the guest list, he said, his voice gravelly but steady. Saw your post on that Survivor blog. You still taking names? I hesitated. You want to be part of it? There was a long pause. She told my wife I cheated on her, he said finally. Said it was her duty as a Christian woman to tell the truth. She handed her a fake email thread she claimed she found on my computer. My wife left me. Took the kids. I lost everything. Took me 4 years to prove it was fake. I couldn't speak. And you know what the worst part is? He said. She said she was helping. That same phrase. Over and over. She always thought she was helping. I added his name to the list. By the end of that week, the final head count was 47. 47 people from across 4 decades, all with different stories, different scars, but the same common thread, Diane. And for once, she had no idea what was coming. June 10th arrived faster than I expected. The weather was flawless, blue skies, golden sun, a breeze just strong enough to keep the heat off. I arrived early, dressed in a simple gray suit. Not flashy, just clean, professional. I greeted the catering staff, confirmed both bookings, did a sound check in the community center, and helped the AV guy set up a screen for a short video montage I'd edited together. And then, I waited. People started trickling in around 5. Beth, the ex-best friend with the jewelry accusation, brought cookies. Thomas from Portland gave me a tired hug and said, "Let's do this." Even Daniel showed up, holding a single photo in his hand. Him and my mom at a family barbecue, back when he still smiled without effort. By 5:45, the room was full, quiet, charged, solemn. I gave them all a brief rundown. How it would work, when we'd walk over, how I'd introduce the night. No one was looking for vengeance, just truth. At exactly 6:10 p.m., 10 minutes after her party officially started, I stepped outside. From across the street, I could see her, radiant in her tailored sky blue dress, surrounded by laughing guests and floating candles. She looked happy, perfect, in control, and then her eyes landed on me. I smiled. She didn't. I raised a glass and nodded. And then I turned, and behind me, one by one, people began filing out of the community center. A slow, solemn line. No banners, no signs, just faces, familiar faces. One by one, they crossed the street, and her smile began to fade. She looked confused, then wary, and then, for the first time I could remember in years afraid. But we weren't there to attack. We were there to speak. And as the final guest stepped forward, Claire, dressed in white, eyes steady, I knew we were ready. It was time, but I hadn't even delivered the first speech yet. And she had no idea how deep this truth was going to cut. The silence when Claire stepped onto the lawn was absolute. Conversations froze mid-sentence. Champagne flutes paused in midair. All eyes shifted from her to my mom, who still stood beneath a floral archway with her hand on her hip and a birthday corsage pinned perfectly to her shoulder. For a second, I thought she might faint. Her expression didn't crumble, it calcified. Her smile vanished, her eyes narrowed ever so slightly, and her back straightened like she was preparing for war. She opened her mouth to speak, but then she saw the rest of them. The line of people following Claire like shadows of a past she had buried in polished politeness and whispered gossip. 47 people. Some in heels, some in sneakers, some in stiff blazers that hadn't seen daylight in years. All of them here because of her. She blinked rapidly and took a small step back, trying to reassert control. "What's going on?" she said, aiming her words past Claire and toward me. Her voice was still syrupy, but it cracked slightly around the edges. "Scott, what is this?" I stepped forward, not angry, just calm, clear, grounded in a way I hadn't been since I was a kid. "It's your birthday, Mom. You said you wanted it to be about family." I turned to the small crowd now gathered. Some of her friends were murmuring. A few looked confused, others uncomfortable. Only a handful had the good sense to excuse themselves and pretend they didn't see anything. The rest stayed, the kind of people who slowed down when they pass a car wreck. "Everyone," I said, projecting just enough to carry across the lawn without shouting, "thank you for coming. This evening, we're here not just to celebrate my mother's 60th birthday, but also to acknowledge the impact she's had on the lives around her." My mom's lips parted. "Scott," she hissed, low and sharp. "What are you doing?" I ignored her. I gestured behind me. "These are people my mother has known, some briefly, some for decades. Each of them has their own story. Each of them was affected by her choices. Tonight, we're giving them a voice." Claire stepped forward. She didn't look at me. She didn't need to. Her eyes were locked on my mom. "When I first met you," Claire said, "I thought you were elegant, warm, generous. You made me feel like part of the family." Mom swallowed hard. "And then, slowly, you made me feel like I was wrong. You told me Scott was unstable, that he had a history of episodes, that I should keep my distance for my own safety. And the way you said it, it wasn't dramatic. It was gentle, like a concerned nurse giving bad news." Claire took a breath. "But I've spent the last year learning the difference between concern and control. And now I know, what you did wasn't protection. It was sabotage. You poisoned something real because you couldn't control it." Someone gasped. Mom started to speak, but another voice cut in. It was Beth, the ex-best friend whom Mom had accused of theft. "She did the same thing to me," Beth said. "We were best friends for 10 years. Until I got engaged. Then she started planting seeds, about my fiancé, about my character. She told him I had a pattern of instability. He left me 2 months before the wedding. Now my mom was visibly shaking. She turned to the nearest cluster of friends, the church group, trying to rally support. "This is ridiculous," she said. "They're twisting things." I was trying to help. "Really?" said Thomas, stepping forward. "Is that what you were doing when you stole my research proposal in college and claimed it as your own?" Her head snapped toward him. "I lost the fellowship," he said. "You got it. And when I confronted you, you told everyone I was jealous. Unstable. Sound familiar?" The circle was tightening now. Not physically, but emotionally. You could feel it in the air, the tension, the weight of so many unspoken things finally finding oxygen. My mom took a shaky step backward, bumping into the side of the flower arch. "This is a setup," she said. This is slander." "No," I said gently. "This is the truth, and it's been waiting for you." I nodded toward the far end of the garden, where we'd set up a second photo wall. A few guests turned to look. One of the AV guys, a friend I'd hired to run the setup, tapped the space bar on a laptop, and the screen flickered to life. A slideshow began. 47 faces. 47 quotes. No narration. No music. Just truth, in black and white. People murmured. Some looked visibly shaken. Others kept watching, eyes wide. And then, right in the middle of it all, came a photo of Daniel, my cousin. He stepped forward. She told my wife I cheated, he said. Forged emails. Destroyed my marriage. I didn't know it was fake until it was too late. He pulled a folded sheet of paper from his jacket. Here's the forensic report from the tech expert who confirmed the metadata was altered. He passed it to one of the guests, who held it like a bomb. And then Daniel looked her dead in the eyes. I would have taken that to my grave, Aunt Diane. But not anymore. She opened her mouth, maybe to deny it, maybe to cry, but she never got the chance. Because then came the final blow. My father. He hadn't said a word all night. He'd been standing off to the side, pale, hands clasped like he was praying. But now he stepped forward. And when he spoke, his voice was quiet, but it carried. I knew she was difficult, he said, but I didn't know how far it went. He turned to face the crowd. I stayed silent for years because I thought I was keeping the peace. But peace built on silence isn't peace, it's denial. And I want to apologize. To my son. To all of you. For not speaking up sooner. My mom looked like she'd been struck. Her eyes darted from person to person, searching for an ally, a lifeline, someone, anyone, to defend her. But no one moved. And in that moment, she was finally, undeniably alone. She dropped her glass. It shattered on the stone path, the sound sharp as a slap. I've done everything for this family, she said, her voice shaking. Everything. And this is how you repay me. No, I said. This is how we free ourselves. She let out a small, bitter laugh. You're going to regret this. All of you. You think you're heroes, but you're just children playing with fire. I'm not a child, I said quietly. I'm your son, and I'm finally done pretending you didn't burn everything you touched. With that, I turned away, and slowly, the others followed. We walked across the lawn in silence, back toward the community center. The string lights behind us flickered in the dusk like the last heartbeat of her empire. Some of her guests left immediately. Others stayed just long enough to say polite goodbyes, their smiles brittle, their minds clearly elsewhere. Back in the community center, people hugged. Some cried. Others just stood in small groups, breathing the rare air of vindication. The quiet hum of relief filled the space. Claire came up to me and touched my arm. You did it, she said. I nodded, suddenly exhausted. I didn't do it alone. She smiled. Still, it was brave. I shook my head. It wasn't about being brave. It was about being done. We stood there for a while, watching the faces on the wall, the pieces of a truth that had finally come together. In the weeks that followed, the fallout was swift. Mom's birthday photos never made it to Facebook. The ones she posted were heavily cropped, carefully framed, and captioned with vague comments like, an eventful night. People sure can surprise you. But the damage was done. Word spread. Quietly at first, then louder. Some of her church friends stopped inviting her to things. The wine club fizzled. My cousin Rachel stopped taking her calls. Even a few of her old allies, people who had once echoed her whispers, began to drift away. At first, she tried to regain control. She spun new narratives. Claimed she was being attacked, that we were jealous, ungrateful, brainwashed. But none of it stuck. Not this time. Because too many people had finally seen her, truly seen her, for who she was. And me? I didn't gloat. I didn't post about it. Didn't rub it in. I just moved on. I signed the publishing deal. The book came out 6 months later and found its own quiet audience. I started therapy again. Real therapy, not the guilt-laced talks Mom used to weaponize. I reconnected with Claire. Slowly. Carefully. We weren't rushing into anything, but we both knew something real had been salvaged from the wreckage. Most importantly, I felt free. Not happy all the time. Not healed overnight. But free. And that was enough. One day, months later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting. My mom. Inside was a single line. You've humiliated me. I hope it was worth it. I stared at it for a moment, then folded it up and dropped it in the shredder. Because she was wrong. It wasn't humiliation. It was accountability. And yes, it was absolutely worth it. Final line. I didn't ruin her birthday. I just let the truth be the guest of honor.